In this video, I'll show you how to install the Dinan intake on your BMW. This specific one is for models with the B58 engine, so the M140i, 240i, 340i, and 440. They don't currently have an offering from Dinan for cars with the bigger engine bays like the 5 and 7 series or the X models, but this will be a very similar process to the ones that do. So if you get MST, AP, basically any intake that replaces this upper intake pipe, it'll be a very similar process. So I'll show a quick comparison with stock and talk about why I actually chose this one. So you can see it is an enclosed intake. I didn't want an open filter because I'm not a fan of intake noise, and I like maintaining the cold air design that's on the factory intake where it pulls air from the grill. So that way it keeps intake air temps down as low as possible. You're not sucking in any hot air from the engine bay, and it'll run a little more efficiently. Also, the Dinan box you can see is a lot bigger than the stock one. It stands up higher and it's a little bit wider. So there's more air available on demand that helps it just run more efficiently. You'll have faster spool, and it'll kind of future-proof it. If I do go with a bigger turbo in the future, it'll support that as well. The actual power gains aren't that significant. I think they say about 5 to 10 horsepower across the rev range, and that's mostly from increasing spool down low and holding boost for longer up top. So overall, I mean, I don't think it'll have like a huge gain in peak horsepower, but it will help the car just breathe better, run more efficiently, and it might have a slight improvement on intake air temps. We'll have to see in my logs. And then last thing, and I guess the most obvious thing, is it's made of carbon fiber, which is really nice. It kind of has the bling factor, obviously. I'm not a huge carbon fiber guy. This will be the only carbon fiber on my entire car, actually. But for an intake, it's very efficient because you have a benefit to plastic that a lot of people don't know. When you switch to an aluminum pipe, it retains heat. And so when the engine bay gets hot, the piping will get hot, and it'll make the air inside the intake hotter and make your intercooler have to work harder to cool it back down. So with carbon fiber, you don't have that issue. It doesn't look as bad as plastic. It looks a lot better than plastic, and it still has the temperature benefits that plastic have when you're actually running an intake. So I mean, it is very expensive. It's about $600, but I actually got mine used, so it was a great value for me. Either way, you can't really go wrong with it. So I'll show you guys how to install it now. Removing the factory intake is really simple. The first thing we're doing is removing this intake sensor, and anytime you're unplugging anything in the engine bay, I recommend just going to the back and disconnect the negative terminal of the battery, so you don't even have to think about it, don't have to worry about any electrical issues. And then to remove this plug, you're going to pop this up and then squeeze it in and unplug the MAF sensor. Then for the actual intake box, you're going to take off these clips. There's one here, one here, one here, and then there's another one down in this corner. I already disconnected it since it's kind of hard to get to. And then you have a hose clamp right here. You can use like a 6mm socket or a 1/4 inch to loosen that. And then you're going to take this whole box off. This intake filter isn't needed, so you can go ahead and take that out too. And then here you can kind of see how the stock intake works. All this dirt and stuff down here is getting sucked in through this hole. And that hole pulls air from the front of the grill. If you look inside here, that's where the air comes from. So when people ask about our cold air intake, you're actually pulling air from the front of the car, and it's a completely sealed cold air system. That's why the stock airbox works so well. So the only other thing you're going to do is remove this upper intake pipe, and unfortunately the hose clamp for that is all the way down there, and it's facing the wrong way for easy access. So what I'm going to do is remove this lower airbox for a little more access, and that way you can get to it right from here. Just use a swivel socket adapter to get to it. So something unique to the Dinan setup is you need to actually remove these clips, and this is what they look like. The stock ones are on the left, the Dinan ones on the right. And they give you these smaller ones to replace the stock ones so that it can get a good clamp on the upper Dinan box. And to remove this, it's actually kind of a headache. You basically just bend this, twist it all the way down, and it'll deform the clip. Like this is one that I removed. And it'll deform the clip a little bit. See how the hinge is like bent downwards? But that way it'll actually just slide out. And if you ever want to reinstall it, you can just twist it with some pliers to kind of get it back close to the original position. And then the last thing you need to do is swap over the MAF sensor. So you remove these two T20 screws, pull the MAF sensor out, and transfer it over to the Dinan MAF housing. These are just extra OEM bolts I had. You don't actually need new bolts for it. And it only goes in one way, so you can't really install it incorrectly. But tighten that up, and then you're ready to reinstall. And here we have the Dinan intake installed. Everything for the installation is just the reverse of removal. You put the upper intake pipe and silicone onto the lower pipe, and make sure this little piece of plastic that's sticking out from the radiator fan has clearance. They have like a little depression in the pipe for it, so just make sure it has room. And then you have another piece of silicone attaching to the MAF housing and the upper intake box. So you'll put all that together, clip it all down. Oh, and make sure you put your gasket around the lower box so that it'll seal properly. Mine didn't come with it. Like I said, I bought it used and the previous owner didn't have it. So I went to Home Depot and just bought some foam tape to fill up that channel. It's about 1/4 inch wide, so you can get that at your local hardware store. So yeah, put it all back together, plug in your MAF sensor, and then what I'm gonna do is reflash my map. Since I'm on a tune, I'm just gonna flash it again to help the car relearn a little more quickly. Drive around, test drive it, make sure everything sounds good, feels good, and then you're done. So if there are any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below.